Welcome to The Man Who Woke Up the Buddha. This is Season 3, Episode 5, Rockin' in the Free World. Previously, Sid met up with his enlightened park person friend LJ, who explained why people didn't recognize Sid's Buddha nature. It had something to do with ducks. A few days after his enlightening discussion with LJ at the park, Sid decided to meet the leader of the Hare Krishna people he'd met with Casper. First, he went online to remind himself of the chant, in case he had to say it when he knocked, like a secret password or something. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare. Whoa, quite a tongue twister. After getting out of the cab, Sid walked slowly and somewhat reverently up the sidewalk to the front door, carefully avoiding the cracks, even the bulge caused by a tree root from the giant maple growing 10 yards away. Should I bow or something? He wondered aloud. Just be yourself, the Buddha chuckled. I guess I should just be myself, Sid thought. Whoever that is, the Buddha gave a silent, full-throated laugh. Before Sid could grab the heavy brass knocker below the number 108, the door opened, and a young woman wearing what Sid now recognized as full Krishna regalia opened the door, handed him a flower, and said, Hare Krishna. And a happy Hare Krishna to you too, Sid said, being himself. They were standing in a large foyer that smelled of new incense and old money. Bob has been expecting you. Bob? Sid said. Bob? Thought the Buddha. She simply slid back a heavy wooden door and said, I'll be back with some tea. Bob was sitting behind an ornate antique desk with front panels that matched the beadboard wainscoting, as if it were a built-in bump-out. He had been working on a laptop, and several books were open face down on the desk. A crystal vase of orange flowers was in the front corner. Hare Krishna, Bob said brightly, standing up from behind the desk. Sid was relieved to see that except for the beads around his neck, Bob wasn't dressed in Hare Krishna outfit, like that woman who opened the door. In fact, he was wearing jeans and an orange t-shirt that had an image of Uncle Sam with beads saying, Krishna wants you. Sid wasn't in full Buddha regalia either. Instead of the robe he usually wore, since he spent so much time around the house these days, he had on dress pants, penny loafers, and a hooded sweatshirt Kizzy had given him that read, Satori you. And a happy Hare Krishna to you too, Sid said, just being himself. Okay, maybe you should try being someone else now, the Buddha thought. Ashoka Krishna said you want to learn more about Bhakti Yoga, Bob asked. To join us, or more for your own interest? Bhakti Yoga? Sid asked, confused. I want to learn more about Hare Krishna. It's a common confusion. Think of Bhakti Yoga as a kind of religion, and Hare Krishna is more like a prayer. We don't call him that, but it's a good way to think of it. Oh, sort of like Buddhism and Om. Sort of, the Buddha thought. Sort of, Bob said. Bob heard me? I guess I'm talking too loudly again, the Buddha realized. Why don't you come over here and sit down? Bob gestured towards what looked like a working fireplace with large andirons that had small brass elephants on top. There were 2 cane-backed rockers with a small coffee table between them. I suppose I'm here mostly as part of my own spiritual inquiry, Sid said, settling into one of the rockers. Whoa, the Buddha chuckled. Spiritual inquiry? Who do you think you are, the Buddha? First, I guess, could you tell me what Hare Krishna and Rama mean? Sid said, forging ahead. I appreciate you asking that question, Bob said. Many people chant it without knowing. To put it simply, Krishna is the all-attractive. Rama is the reservoir of pleasure. And Hare is his feminine principle, his consort in a way, through whom Krishna can taste his own sweetness. It took all Sid had to keep himself from saying that it sounded like a clusterfuck. Instead, he said reverently, so it's kind of like when people blurt out, Mother Mary, oh my God, Jesus Christ. Yes, Bob said in a remarkably neutral tone of voice. He appreciated Sid's ability to be wise and guileless at the same time, although he wasn't sure which came first. Fortunately, at that moment, the Krishna woman walked in with a serving tray that had 2 cups of tea and cookies that looked suspiciously like the ones that Casper had found so disturbing when they had lunch on the college green. Sid noticed that she had managed to serve them without seeming in the least bit subservient. Bob noticed that Sid had noticed. He was pleased. Well, thanks for clearing that up, Sid said, more confused than ever. He decided to try to get on more solid ground. So what's Hinduism? Well, Hinduism is not one single thing, Bob said, kind of relieved that Sid had changed the subject. Even better, Sid said cautiously. Well, about 1,000 years ago, there were many different sects living on the side of a river called the Sindhu, and their wisdom and beliefs were all loosely based on the ancient Vedas. Over time, they became known collectively as Sindhus, which eventually became Hindus. Oh, Sid said, struggling not to have acid flashbacks to college philosophy classes. So are the Vedas like the books of the Bible? Well, they are more like a spiritual encyclopedia that covers all fields of human endeavor. There are Vedas on... Sid began to feel a little lightheaded as Bob started describing the thousands of different Vedas. It was as if he were floating on a sea of celestial words, until a few minutes later he rose up from the sea and heard himself saying, I see, it's more like Vedicism. So is there one God in Vedicism? Exactly, but one God can have many names, Bob explained, and take many forms based on different relationships. Just like some people call you Sid and some call you husband. Oh, she calls me Sid too. Bob laughed. He really did appreciate Sid's perspectives, regardless how unconventional. Well, some people call you grandpa or boss or buddy. You are one, but you appear in all kinds of different forms and are perceived in all kinds of different ways. Well, mostly I appear like the Buddha to myself, Sid said, thinking that simplified things. Bob decided to let that one pass so he could continue making his point. So in the same way, one person has different names according to different relationships, people have different names for God. In fact, some people talk about 33 million gods, but that's more just to say how God is one in all his multiplicity. But enough about Hinduism and Bhakti Yoga, my friend. You said you were here as part of your spiritual inquiry. Can you be more specific? Well, it's just that when I realized I was the Buddha, I figured it would be interesting to share ideas with other spiritual leaders. So when your main man, Ashoka, at the free lunch, told me that Prabhupada had changed forms or died or whatever you people do, I asked who his leader was, and the rest as well. Now, pretty good, the Buddha thought. I could barely say it better myself. Wonderful, wonderful, Bob said. But first tell me what you mean when you say you're the Buddha. Well, that I'm the Buddha, Sid said, as if the question baffled him. Okay, Bob said slowly. Sid hoped Bob could completely accept him for who he really was, so they could get right down to business without the usual mixed-up deity identity discussions. Well, soon after I became the Buddha, I realized that everything has evolved, Sid said. Well, actually, that was me who realized it, the Buddha pointed out. Science, mathematics, architecture, baseball. But religions have pretty much stayed the same. For example, back when I was doing my Gautama gig, I was a big fan of getting free from suffering and reaching enlightenment. Now my spiel, it wasn't a gig, it was our sadhana, the Buddha sighed. It's not a spiel either, it's our dharma. Sid paused. Bob waited. Forgot what I was saying, Sid admitted. Bob waited patiently, taking a small sip of tea and a slow, contemplative bite of a cookie. Just tell him it's the radiation talking, the Buddha suggested. Must be the radiation talking, Sid laughed apologetically. Ah, Bob acknowledged when Sid tilted his head to show his incisions. Bob then paused before continuing a little more slowly. Well, you were just going to tell me what your truth is now. Oh, right. Well, in the old days, I was always pontificating about how enlightenment was an awareness of all that is. Yes, Bob said, which got everyone hung up on getting enlightened. So I want to let them know that they don't have to worry about it, because it turns out that all that is isn't all that is. So why bother becoming aware of all that is when you could be completely unaware of something that isn't? The Buddha smiled. Now you're just asking for it, he thought. Yes, Bob said, carefully saying it so that it could be taken either as a statement or question. Yes, Sid asked, a little unnerved by Bob's facile response. Get to the point, the Buddha suggested. Ask him what's next for Bhakti Yoga. Okay, Sid said, what I really want to know is whether there is something like that in your religion, something that people are hung up on that maybe it would be more fun if they let go. Well, first, Bob laughed, in terms of more fun, the union of the all-attractive, its feminine principle, and the reservoir of pleasure, in other words, Hare, Krishna, and Rama, is as fun as it gets. Sid had to drag his attention away from the last time he'd been in a threesome, which was never. So you're asking, Bob continued, if there could ever be more than that. Well, even if there were something as much fun, we couldn't conceive it. Let me explain. Yes, Sid said, proving he could be as cryptic as Bob. Bob wasn't fazed. For example, he said, we can conceive the consciousness of a carrot because our consciousness is superior to that of carrots. It's a little harder to know ourselves because we're studying ourselves with the objects we're studying. By that logic, since the gods transcend our ability to conceive them, practically speaking, Krishna is inconceivable. Bob's laugh was so contagious that Sid started laughing too, although he had gotten distracted thinking about what he knew about carrots and how they were kind of the color of Hare Krishna robes. Fortunately, he returned from his root reverie in time to hear Bob conclude by saying, in fact, I could say that we both conceive and are devoted to what is beyond all that is. Yes, Sid said, frowning a little. From the Buddha's, my perspective, I agree that we are whatever we conceive and are devoted to it in equal measure. That's why I love carrots. Bob raised his eyebrows and took a slow sip of his tea. The Buddha raised his etheric eyebrows and wished he had a cup of tea too. Let's try again. Ask him if devotion is all that is. I see, Sid said slowly. But is devotion all that is? He wasn't really sure what he was asking, but that had never stopped him before. Bob raised his eyebrows a little further. Are you asking if there's any greater relationship to Krishna than devotion? I guess so, Sid said, rocking in his chair a little more rhythmically as he tried to think of a song lyric that combined motion, potion, emotion, and devotion. Probably Motown. Don't go there, the Buddha suggested. No, Bob said, or at least, while I can easily conceive that all we perceive is not all that is, whatever else there is would simply create the opportunity for greater devotion. How am I going to get him out of this one, the Buddha wondered. Okay, ask him if he can conceive of reality beyond that. Gee, Sid said quizzically, I guess I'm asking whether you can conceive of reality where devotion doesn't exist. Well, Bob said, venturing beyond a simple yes, if there was, I'd be devoted to that. Okay, let me handle that one too, the Buddha thought. Ask him what he'd do if he could only experience that reality by letting go of devotion. Then Bob, Sid said, his voice beginning to fade, his rocker beginning to slow. Sid, the Buddha said. Okay, Sid said softly as if he were staring into the stars. If you could experience something more pleasurable by letting go of devotion? Good, I'd stop there, the Buddha suggested. Well, as I said, Bob answered, whatever it is, I'd be devoted to it. He paused momentarily as if reconsidering. Yes, he paused again. I appreciate you sharing that insight. My pleasure, not in the Rama way, maybe, Sid said weakly as a wave of post-radiation fatigue rolled over him. Maybe I'm just saying... He stopped, looking for the words as if he'd fallen into a dark tunnel, until he added in a whisper, any ultimate reality wouldn't be able to conceive itself. Bob was taken aback, as much by the poignancy of watching Sid's energy drift away, as he was by the mystery Sid had released like a condemned man's last words. Yes, Bob said kindly, in a way that was no longer enigmatic, his smile softening, almost imperceptibly. Sid settled back in the rocker and closed his eyes, thinking how sweet it would be if Bob had some chocolate milk. Hey, I want to say that about 10 years ago, I met a guy named David Wolf, another nice Jewish boy named David, who spent some serious time in the spiritual trenches. David completely changed my assumptions of what people who wear beads and chant on street corners are up to. Obviously, the words here are not his, well, maybe a few are. And you can rest assured you won't see me chanting on any street corners in the near or distant future. But I did want to acknowledge him and his work. Thanks for listening to The Man Who Woke Up the Buddha. Paid annual subscribers receive a free paperback of each season for reference, or because, like me, counterintuitively for someone publishing online, they still often like reading on paper instead of screen.